Thank you, Gail, very much. Food is a great theme. I could strike a food theme in Dr. Packer's honor. Dr. Packer, glad to see you here. We honor you tonight, and I want to tell you a little bit about him from a Regent College perspective. We're just down on the other end of the road here on Westbrook Mall. I think a lot of you know where Regent is. And on behalf of my colleagues, especially the faculty colleagues that we have, just a great honor for me to represent them in paying tribute to somebody who has meant a great deal in the life and times of Regent. I want to take your mind back to 1979. Where were you in 1979? Well, in 1979, some of you were right here in Vancouver. This building was not here in 1979. In 1979 was the year that Jim and Kit Packer arrived from England in Vancouver. And since then, they have been settled in two institutional homes. One is Regent College, and the other is St. John's Church. And you'll hear from the rector of St. John's in a little bit, I think. I'm turning over the roast part to him. That's cue, David. Yes. The roasting is your job. I'm going to honor him. You can roast him. But in the fall of 1979, a very famous international scholar and writer, J.I. Packer, arrived at Regent College. And Regent College was not much to arrive at. In those days, I was sitting next to Neil here, who I just met. He was a student of Dr. Packer's in 1979, in fact. And he will testify to what is absolute truth, which was that the Regent College that J.I. Packer arrived in 1979 was two converted fraternity houses and a portable unit, and it was anything but decorous. Dr. Packer comes from England, as you know. He has studied in Oxford, the city of dreaming spires, magnificent architecture, sheer beauty, poetic charm, and he comes to fraternity houses on the UBC campus. Anything but glorious, and that then set up the ongoing conversation that happened many times in front of those fraternity houses when people looked at the building and said, "You mean J.I. Packer teaches here? This place?" Now, partially I tell you that story in order to locate the long historical distance that separates us from then and now, and we have a newer, shinier building that's less disgraceful. But the point I'm making is it tells you something about J.I. Packer, that he actually left the place of history and heritage and beauty to come to a little nothing place because God called him here. And there was a project and a mission and a ministry at Regent that excited him, and he has invested his energy in it tirelessly since 1979. When I just arrived back, as Gail was intimating, after 20 plus years away, doing other things, to come back to be the academic dean at Regent. I met up with Dr. Packer last summer when I first arrived, and one of the first things he said to me was, I want you to understand that I have been a Regent man, and I am a Regent man, and I will always be a Regent man. His loyalty and dedication to Regent, because this is the place God has called him and a place that God has used him, and he has been a driving force of the college for such a long time. And it's meant several things to us, I think, to have J.I. Packer as a part of our community and as a leading light of our faculty. Let me just say a little bit about a few of those things. One was, when he did arrive in 1979, he was already very well known. And Regent College was not. Regent College was a fledgling kind of institution that really got off the ground in 1970 and started growing and started doing kind of out-of-the-box things and started getting a little bit of momentum. But it really propelled us forward considerably to have J.I. Packer arrive. And when J.I. Packer arrived, he already had been the author of Knowing God. Some of you already have your copies from back then. He had already published quite a bit. He was getting well known in evangelical circles in North America and very well received and honored and respected. He was finding his voice there, and he brought that voice to Regent as his base of operation. That then did a couple of different things for Regent. It put us on the map in a considerable way. And if I could put it this way, it gave us the good housekeeping seal of approval Because J.I. Packer, even in those days, as he has since grown even more into this description, was really the gold standard of evangelical theology. If we had J.I. Packer on our side, then we were solid. Then we were grounded, we were biblical, we were orthodox, we were Trinitarian, and in our good moments we lived up to his vision for us. But it was a very significant thing that Regent is known for its solid and robust evangelical theology through his legacy as well as those of many other colleagues that have been with him on faculty for many years. That was a gift that he gave to us. And Regent, I think, also helped shape him by the kind of students that have been there all those generations and the kind of colleagues that he had, shaped him to encourage him and to bless him and to stimulate him to go on to do the things that he has done so marvelously and so well. It was the pad from which he was launched into a wider ministry, particularly all across North America, and his connections with things like Christianity Today. I remember one time, as a student of his, driving him to the airport to drop him off for his flight to Chicago for a meeting of the editorial board of Christianity Today, and picking him up on the other end to take him bird watching in the Rifle Bird Sanctuary with his wife Kit, who is the keen birder of the couple. And so all that's true, you know. And so in terms of the significance of JIP to Regent College, you can hardly overstate it, really. We are tremendously in his debt. We are beneficiaries of his legacy, and so many of us were taught by him so well in systematic theology and in historical theology. Many of us learned to love the Puritans through his love of the Puritans. And quite often, I think we picked up a little bit of the incredibly balanced viewpoint that he brings. Biblical, balanced, always sensitive. A couple of little things I wanted to mention about him that I've learned and pay a little bit of a tribute to. I know something of his life story, and there's a biography of him you might want to read that has a few of these juicy details. But one of the things of that marked his early childhood was an accident that laid him up, but it's also the accident that put books in his hands. And he became quite a feverish reader from an early age, about age 7 or so. And one of the things that I have learned about writers is that to be a good writer, let alone a great writer, you have to be a good, if not a great reader. So the roots of the marvelous prose that J.I. Packer has written so many wonderful pages of really come out of the habits of learning to love to read as a little boy. And then another little tidbit of the story that I love is that on the occasion of his 11th birthday, rather than the bicycle showing up that he was hoping for, and if you were an 11-year-old boy, wouldn't you be hoping for a bicycle? Actually, what showed up was a typewriter. And I think it's the same typewriter he uses to this day. That would have been 1937. I think it's just been oiled a few times, and it's still going strong. The writing that Dr. Packer has done has been by typewriter. It is not done to this day by computer. And he does not have email, and my assistant at the college handles those things for him. But I can picture him in my own mind's eye over this old manual typewriter clunking away, diligently, caring, and loving every single word. There's nothing quite like Packer prose, after all. Right? He has a little saying, Packer by name, Packer by nature, and there's truth in that there's economy and precision, there's utmost clarity. And you know when you're reading J.I. Packer that he has worried over every word that's there, and that he's sure that every word that's there is exactly the right word to do the job that it is there to do. The logical precision, the clarity of definitions, the clarity of argument is stellar. It always has been, it still is to this day, and that's a real gift to us. It has been a gift to the church. Another thing I just want to mention by way of tribute that I learned, and many of us have picked up from him, is a vision and desire for communicating at the level that the church reads. He is a scholar, and a marvelous scholar, and a very learned man, a very learned scholar, but his main vocation has been not writing books for the sake of other scholars, although he's done some of that. His main vocation has been putting books in the hands of Christians who want to learn their faith, want to understand the Scriptures, who want to grow in love and service of God. And he has an incredible gift in that way, that incredible gift of clear, prescient communication. It's all fueled by the background knowledge and careful learning of a scholar, but it's not show-offy at all. You've never felt like you were bogged down in too many arcane details at one moment in a J.I. Packer book. I guarantee it. But behind it all is this immense learning put to the service of the church. And I think that's a marvelous model for any of us in the scholarly side of the world, to remember that our calling is not really to just prod and jab in the academic jousting that can go on in scholarship, but it is to take the best of what has been thought and said and think it through really well and put it out for people. One of his sayings, truth is for people. And his all good theology is for people. It's for the sake of building up people, for the sake of their life of faith. I've been inspired by that. I've been encouraged by that. He's challenged many. He set a marvelous example to us in those regards. All of us who are readers or writers. But for all of us that are a part of the Regent College community and have been over years, we can hardly overstate the debt we have to J.I. Packer and what he has given to us and how he has shaped our community. So it's a pleasure and a real honor to be here on behalf of Regent to say thank you, Jim, for all that you have done. We love you, we honor you, we bless you. Thanks.
I was unaware this was meant to be a roast, Jim. Thank you. It's not. I was not communicated, but I learned early on that if you try to get the better of Jim in humour, you take your life in your own hands. I was early on in my ministry at St. John's. Jim was preaching, and I introduced him and made some joke at his expense. Went over like a lead balloon. And Jim stood up and said something like, well, thank you very much for that attempt at humour. Jim, it's my chance just to say a couple of comments. There are two things. I'm working as being Jim's pastor and minister for 20 years. There are two things that strike me. One is that Jim has been a real colleague. He's a friend and colleague. And having someone like Jim in your congregation is very humbling for the preacher. It's having someone there who's written more books than you've read. Is very humbling. He's published more books than anyone else in British Columbia. He's named, one of the most influential thinkers that the church has. He's edited all sorts of significant works. This morning, through the post, his latest thing, which is an edited catechism, dropped through the door, and I thought this is going to be an instant mini classic, just because it's got Jim's name on it. I mean, Jim is a colleague, and having Jim in the congregation, he continues to say to me that he'll do whatever I ask him to do, which is like coaching a minor league hockey team with Wayne Gretzky on it, saying I'll play any position you want, which is just as great. But I warn you, he has written forwards and blurbs for hundreds and hundreds of books, but I warn you, you need to read them carefully. I once read a book that Jim had written a forward to, and I thought the book was poorly written, confused, and not helpful. And I said to Jim, why did you write the forward to that book? And he said to me, well, he said, did you read what I wrote? And I went and read the forward, and he had damned the book with very faint praise. Jim's been a colleague to me and to many. And one of the things that you find if you begin to know Jim is he draws you into the circle of colleagues. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that Jim acts as a connector. He's a connector. And we hear today a great deal about the fact that stories change the world. And Jim is, above everything else, I think, a story writer. And through his life and his work, he's acted as a connector between very different groups. Evangelicals and Roman Catholics, between Pentecostals and Anglicans, between people from very different corners of Christianity. Some evangelicals think he's far too liberal. Most liberals think he's far too evangelical because they don't really understand what he's trying to do. Because above all, Jim is again and again in his writings, which get brilliantly described. As a storyteller, he is writing about the biggest story, the story that's larger than all our imaginations, the story that's wider than the world. It's, of course, the story of God. And God has given to Jim the unique ability to be able to see into that big story and to communicate in a way which somehow focuses our hearts and our minds on what is new and different and very beautiful, and stimulates our desire, our hunger, at the same time being very familiar and right. He connects our longings into that big story. And I think that part of the genius of it, he doesn't do it by his own identity or his own, position. He stands at a sort of strange boundary between the story of God and our story. And what he does is, in all his writing, even in the most theologically acute of his writing, he tries to tell us who we are, where we've come from, and where we're going. And I too think that Jim is a Canadian treasure, and he's a colleague, and he connects. And I can't sit down without saying that I know part of tonight is about heroes in literature, and I've always thought of Jim as a bit of a Gandalf. If there was one person who would be, it would be Gandalf, who is very wise. He does things that nobody else understands, and he's always going away somewhere. Jim, thank you very much for being a colleague and a connector. We honour you tonight.
Like David, I'm from Australia, and Australia has a very special category of people. They're called living treasures. And I don't know why Canada doesn't have it, and I don't know why the world doesn't have it, but Jim is a living treasure. A decade ago, or a little more than a decade ago, I would have bet my house I'd never be a Christian. When I became Christian, I didn't know any other Christians, but within a week, I was under the shepherding of Dr. Packer. He somehow kept tabs on me through the ups and downs that it takes when you start growing. And I'm very, very grateful for that. You've heard all the eulogies, things that I'm going to say have already been said. But I'd like to talk about Dr. Packer, the Word Guild, and Life Vancouver. Dr. Packer is a life member of the Word Guild, an honorary thing. The Word Guild had already bestowed its highest award on him, and so he is a life member. But in terms of Right Vancouver, he is our patron. And what does that mean? It means that every now and then I phone him up and I say, would you like to come for lunch? And he says yes. And so he comes, and the waiter will come and say, would you like something? And he'll say, you have a very fine white wine. Yes. And then gradually I talk to him, and Dr. Packer has helped me with faith, and most importantly, with problems that I faced as director of Right Vancouver. Would he recommend this? Does he think this person can do that? Does this person talk ordinary, or is he up there? And so every now and then he'll say, Well, he's got a good reputation, but Beverly, he's not for the common person. Try that. We thought hard and long about how we can honor you. And I phoned you up and asked if you'd like a crystal vase, and you said, I have too many. And so we're going to give you two intangible evidences of our and my personal esteem. And the first thing is there is now in existence an entity called Packer Publishing. And right now you're going to get those three books off the press of Packer Publishing. They're from a series that Roman Short and I started some time ago, and they're called Learn About Jesus. And I'm pretty sure that in September or so there'll be something called, and it's 8 people meet Jesus, it's a series of 8 questions and answers, 8 surprises and stories. And I'm pretty sure in September we'll be doing 8 catechesical facts. Because Jim is absolutely convinced that we need catechism. We need to have a firm foundation for our faith. Our faith can't wander all over the place. It's got to be grounded. Now, as well, we thought long and hard. Excuse me, Jim, could you bring my bag again? We thought long and hard about another lasting tribute. And so what we decided to do at Right Vancouver is institute an annual J.I. Packer Award for excellence in the Christian arts. The person getting it this year is known to many of you. She's broadly based. I've already given away the gender, so if you're male, you can brush yourself off the left. The most important thing about this person is that she is generous. Generous in mind, in spirit, in friendship, in connections. Whatever I have, this is her way of thinking, I will give. A person who has served on far too many committees for me to mention, you'd be bored stiff, has reached levels of excellence in various things, such as, have you figured out who it is yet, Deb? Such as the theatre, such as script writing. Deb has been with Right Vancouver from the beginning, and this would never have happened without Deb sitting and drinking piles of red wine with me while we brainstormed and got this thing off the ground. And so it's my pleasure right now to present an original piece of art by our own Melanie Anastasia and some flowers to Deborah Sears, the first recipient of the J.I. Packer Award for Excellence in the Christian Arts.